today we will be recording my mom,
Carrie Augustin.
Carrie Augustin. So, Mom, where were you born and what year was it?
I was born in Kalispell Hospital in 1965.
And did you continue to live in the Flathead the rest of your years,
I
or?
did. I did. I was raised in Columbia Falls. My parents relocated there from New Jersey, which they were in for just a short time, and they were born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Salt Lake. What brought him to Kalispell or Columbia Falls?
My dad had a civil engineering degree from the University of Utah, and at some point in his life, he had been to Montana and he really loved it. And they were constructing the Anaconda Aluminum Refining Company in Columbia Falls. So he came in as a civil engineer during the construction and he stayed with them. He finished up um, as a power broker, brokering electricity to run the aluminum company when he ultimately retired.
All right. So, did your grandpa and grandma know each other when they, or your parents know each other before this, or did they meet when they moved to Montana?
They met in college. My dad my dad was actually the youngest child of a single mom, and when he was, I think, like a junior in high school, his mom and his brother decided to move to Oakland, California, because there was better work there for her, and he didn't want to go. So he stayed on with some friends in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then he was able to go to college on the GI Bill.
GI Bill. All right. So, what was it like in high school for you growing up? And what was some memories that you have from high school?
Mm, high school,
Or even before high school? Your whole school career until you graduated. What was it like every day for Carrie Augustin?
I think life was pretty great.
Pretty great.
Uh, I was the youngest of five kids. When I was like in grade school, my brothers and sisters were around, and they were good to me. We did we did lots of things as a family. Um, I think I think growing up when I grew up, there was more of a focus on family than there was on what kids have going on in their life, like they do now. And so we did a lot of outdoor things. We did a lot of camping, snow skiing, bike riding, fishing. So that was great. When I got into high school, I was around athletics, but I was a cheerleader. I didn't compete.
Mm-hmm.
And
And by this time, all your siblings, they were out of high school, correct?
that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
The brother who was closest in age to me was 6 years older. So he graduated before I entered junior high. And I was kind of a single child then at the end,
Yeah.
which was had its benefits too. I got to travel a lot with my parents.
All right. So, growing up, who would you say inspired you the most?
Mm, Probably growing up, I would have said my dad.
Your dad?
Yeah, because he was educated and focused, and he set very high standards. And I think I wanted to meet his standards and I wanted to emulate that behavior also. I think he had very high character. Um, was a very thoughtful person. My mom was very thoughtful also and very kind, but my dad was kind of an overachiever.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, not saying your favorite sibling, but which sibling did you seem to relate with the most or have the most connection with?
Without a doubt, it would have been my brother Chris, who was closest in age to me.
Mm-hmm.
He was around longer than the rest, and he was my hero. He really took care of me. He would take me on dates.
Mm-hmm.
Not he and I on a date, but when he had a date with another girl, I got to go a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember he had a paper route even into high school, which I think now would be considered kind of weird.
Yeah.
But if there was like a movie playing in Kalispell, because Columbia Falls didn't have much of a theater, and we wanted to go, and he didn't have any money, he would go. Paper boys used to have to collect for the papers, and so he'd go out and he'd collect from a few houses till we had enough money, and he'd take me to the show, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I really related to him the most.
All right. So you've told me you grew up on McDonald Lake during the summer, correct?
Correct.
What was that like growing up?
When we first moved there, I thought it was awful. Because I didn't have any friends there. All my friends were in Columbia Falls, and so I didn't have anyone to play with, and it rained pretty much till the middle of July every year.
Yeah.
But then I found another girl my exact age who was kind of in the same boat. Her family ran the boat rental place on Lake McDonald. So she and I became friends, and we would bicycle and we would play cribbage, and then it got to be a lot more fun, and we would spend hours and hours and hours in the lake. Even though everybody thinks it's really cold, I think when you're younger you don't feel the water so much, and we just spent every day in the lake. So that's great. Yeah.
And do you still keep touch with her till today?
I don't now, but it's kind of interesting. We kept in touch a little bit in high school because during the winter she lived in Libby, which was quite a ways away. But when we ended up going to college at MSU, we were both in the same sorority. So that was fun.
So you guys met up again?
Yep.
All right. So after high school and after growing up, what would you say one of your best trips in life you've ever had?
Two come to mind. When I went to Europe in college, that was, I guess I would say life-changing.
Life-changing. Is that something you'd like to do again before?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I met kids from across the United States, mostly East Coast, which was a new experience to me. Most of them were from quite affluent families. A number of them were of the Jewish faith, which I had never come across anyone of the Jewish faith. And we just got to see, so many different cultures and things I'd never been exposed to. And so that was really awesome. And then another great trip is actually when I took you and your brother to Hawaii, because that was super fun.
That was fun. That was a good time. All right. If you had to say one thing that you missed about the old days or that has changed, what would you like to reminisce about?
I think it was the time before technology, and people talked a lot. And what I think is, this might sound kind of weird, but I think as a culture, we have lost the ability to argue. And what I mean by that is we've lost the ability to carry on and articulate our points of view and do that in a respectful manner. Instead, we spend a lot of time liking, forwarding, retweeting, and not able to have interesting and energetic dialogue.
All right. Kind of switch subjects on you. But, so you're married, of course. When did you and my dad, Mark, first meet?
So I was a freshman in high school. And it was during the summer at Lake McDonald.
Yeah. Is it something you just walked across each other on, or how did that all happen?
So my brother, who I was closest to, he had maybe a summer before met a girl from eastern Montana. And her family came back to Glacier Park every summer over the 4th of July. So she sent her little brother down to our cabin to see if my brother was around. And when he came, he brought your dad with him.
Oh, yeah.
And I had known the girlfriend's brother before, but I hadn't known your dad before. And when he walked up on the porch, I thought he was not too hard on the eyes. And so after the brother came, quit coming to find out if my brother was home, your dad stopped back a couple times, and we connected. But we both knew that we lived too far apart to try to keep anything going, and we were in high school, and that probably wouldn't be good for either of us. But we always just stayed in contact. We used to call one another a lot. People wrote letters back then.
Little letters.
So we wrote letters, and I kind of knew I would always see him over the summer.
Come summer.
You know, MEA convention, they would always come up. And so we just kept in contact even into college.
Into college, and it kind of just went from there?
Yeah.
All right. So, another question kind of on the subject. When did you know that you wanted to marry Dad? And one, like, can you try to hold the thing a little? There you go. Right there.
Right
Perfect.
there.
You don't have to be close, but not as shaky, I guess. But
okay.
Good enough.
So, I probably actually knew in high school.
You know?
I did. He was intellectually challenging and interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad really liked him.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom liked him too. And he did things that no other boys I dated had done. Like, he would come by and visit with my parents,
mm-hmm.
even if I wasn't there. And so I knew early on.
Mm-hmm. That's good. All right. So, again, about your wedding day, what is one thing you will always remember about your wedding day? Or multiple things, if there is.
So, while I was in Europe, the trip I took in college, my dad actually died.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dating your father at that time period. So it was a couple years after I got back from Europe. One goal that I had before I got married, I had a couple of goals. I wanted to go to Europe on my own. I wanted to be a collegiate cheerleader. And I did actually make the MSU Bobcat squad, but then I didn't go back to school that next fall.
Yeah.
And I wanted to live and work on my own. So it was a couple years after my dad passed away that we got married, and my two brothers, Roger and Chris, walked me down the aisle.
Yeah.
One thing I remember is just before we started, my oldest brother, Roger, took my arm and he patted my hand and he said, "Walk slow. This is your day."
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great memory I have of that. And then kind of some funny things happened during the wedding. Well, funny in retrospect. There was like a homeless person who just kind of wandered all the way down the aisle to the front of the church and sat down, which was kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
And then also one of our friends had a grand mal seizure
Ooh.
during the wedding. And so we're right in the middle of the service, and somebody in the crowd, one of your dad's friends, stands up and says, "Is there a doctor in the house?" And of course, we thought it was a prank because we didn't turn around and look. And then we could hear the ambulance coming all the way down the lake because we got married outside at Lake McDonald. So those were kind of...
That's got to be kind of cool, too, to get married where you guys kind of met. That's kind of...
It was
a significant thing.
Yep.
If you had one thing, what do you wish you made more time for in your life, even till today?
Play.
Play? More time for play?
More time for play.
That's always a good one. Did you have any sort of nicknames growing up, or did anybody call you something, or did your dad call you, or your mom call you something?
Well, like most kids, when I was in trouble, my middle name came into play. It was Carrie Ellen.
Carrie Ellen.
But my oldest sister, she used to nickname me. She called me two things. She either called me THE, which was when she would write letters to me from college, she would address them to THE Brat. I was the Brat.
The Brat.
So that was kind of my only nickname.
All right.
And then in college, I had a nickname from Caddyshack, and my nickname was Noonan.
Noonan?
Just Newman, and it was Noonan. Yeah.
Huh. All right. Kind of change the subject again. What is something that you have never told me, but my brother may know? Or if there is something.
Something I've never told you that your brother may know. No. I think I tell you more than I tell your brother.
Well, let's keep it that way then, huh?
I can't think of anything.
That's good. Is there anything you would like to ask of me that you've never asked? If time need, we can come back to that one.
Let me ruminate on it a bit.
Ruminate on that one? All right.
Yeah.
Kind of backtracking here. What was your first ever job that you can remember?
Oh, that's easy. So when we moved to Glacier Park on Lake McDonald, and I didn't have anything to do, was 10 years old, and I needed something to do, and I wanted a job. And so your Aunt Sharon, my sister, she was upset that Mom and Dad were going to let me work, she said, because if she starts working now, she'll work the rest of her life. But I was bored to tears, and so I went down to Eddie's Cafe, and I asked to speak to Donna, who I knew owned it, and I got a job bussing tables, and I'd work 4 hours in the morning from 8 to noon, and then I'd go back and I'd work 4 hours in the evening from 6 till 10, and I worked split shift.
How old were you when you first started this job?
10.
10, huh?
10. And I've worked ever since.
Huh. Along with first things, when was your first date that you can recall? And who was it with?
Date. I think maybe in 7th grade, I went to a show with an 8th grader by the name of Chuck Higson.
Chuck Higson. Can you remember the show?
I can't.
You can't remember the show. All right.
No. But there was a theater in Columbia Falls at that time.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I went to the show.
Is this where most of your dates throughout high school would be? You also had a drive-in, didn't you? Was there a drive-in?
Yeah. I was going to say in high school, the big thing where we went on dates all the time was to the drive-in theater, which was in between Columbia Falls, Whitefish, and Kalispell, and that was a big thing.
That was a big deal?
Yeah.
All right. So, kind of jumping around here again. If you had to describe Dad today, how would you describe him?
Describe your dad today?
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the smartest people I've ever known. And I didn't appreciate that until one of the first trips I took him on with Allstate. And I was a little bit worried because I was worried how his world, farming, and my world, business, how he would function there. And he could talk to anybody about economics, politics, farming, sports, world events, history, and I feel badly for him in some respects because he can't stop thinking. Mm-hmm. He cannot stop thinking. He thinks all the time, and he can't look at something and not think about a better way to do it. If he's watching the neighbor mow the lawn, if he's watching somebody park a car, it doesn't matter. He truly can't shut his brain down. So I feel badly for that because there are some times I don't think about a darn thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there any of these traits that you think have been passed down to one of us? Me or Gunnar being?
Well, definitely you are much more like your dad. Maybe not on the thinking department, but you're both pretty sure you know whatever it is at the moment. And you're both very bullheaded. So that's definitely a trait that got passed down.
Trait.
I will say he back it up a little bit better than you can for now. But
give me some time here. We'll get there.
Right, we might get there.
Totally off topic, but I'd say me and Gunnar both have some pretty unique names. Where did we get these names from, or how did you come upon them?
So your grandma and your grandpa on your dad's side, your grandmother was full German.
Full German.
Your grandfather was full Norwegian. And I am Heinz 57. I got a little bit of a whole bunch of countries, but no real nationality. And so I always thought it was really interesting that they had a culture that they could relate to. And so just learning about some of their, it was actually your dad's great uncle, Ivor and Otto, who homesteaded here where we farm. So that's pretty cool. And there was another, relative, Gunnar, from Norway. And we always thought it would be great to to yell, "Gunnar, get home," or that it was a good name to yell at your kid when they were in trouble.
All right.
Yep.
So after having two kids, did the thought of ever having a third or even adopting come to mind?
Yes. Yep. We definitely thought about having a third child. I think you were about 4, maybe 5. Yeah. And we just thought about it, I think, a little too long. And then went, I don't think we can start all over now. So, but we both kind of wished that there'd been one more, because this year has been really, really awful having you guys gone. I mean, it would be, because I have a lot of things that interest me and fill my life, but I miss you guys more than you can even imagine.
And I know losing our 4-legged friend probably did not help that.
That hurt too. It was a tough fall for sure.
And this is a question I don't even have written down, but will I be seeing another 4-legged friend in the future?
Possibly. We kind of figure out the logistics of all of it, because we do want to be able to leave in the winter. It does make it tricky having a 4-legged friend.
Dogs can kind of be a boat anchor sometimes.
They can.
Hold you around.
Yeah.
All right. So, what was one of the most difficult things you had, or difficult about raising children?
That there are not right answers or wrong answers, and probably the most difficult thing is sticking to your guns, because it would be, for the moment, usually a whole lot easier just to let them do whatever they want to do, because they get in your face and they nag, and they're pretty skillful arguers. You are, in particular. But it's hard to remember that your job as a parent is, well, me with 2 boys, to raise men who have integrity and honesty and work ethic, and worry about that more than worrying about whether or not I'm their friend. Because it's for the long haul. It's not for just what is most gives the most immediate gratification.
Yeah. All right, and back to, I guess not back to that yet, but what do you consider one of your most important things in life, or what was your most important thing in your life?
Relationships with people. I mean, it's not that I didn't think that before, but I think as you mature, you finally realize that stuff really means nothing. And what really brings you joy is or what really brings me joy is interacting with people and relationships.
Yeah, I feel that. Oh, where was I? What is one of the hardest decisions you've made in your life, or multiple, if maybe?
Hmm. Um, Probably one of the hardest ones was to sell my agencies.
Mm-hmm. And I guess we haven't really talked about that. What was your first job out of college, or what was your career after college?
Well, my first job out of college, I went to work for an accounting firm in Havre.
Mm-hmm.
And my college training was a combined discipline of business and computer. What I ended up doing was a lot of data entry for an accounting office. And I could do it, and I was pretty decent at it, but
Just wasn't for
I
you.
didn't know it. There was no people interaction. It was
And there was
it
no
was
upward going. It was just kind of.
right. It was very production oriented, and I could have become a CPA, but I wasn't that interested in accounting. And they're just so that was my first career out of college. And then I actually ran into a college friend who was working for Allstate. I had some classes with him, and we just struck up a conversation. And he'd done pretty well so far, and he'd gotten a promotion to a manager. But his first order of business as a manager was to hire his replacement in Havre. And I said, well, I don't really like what I'm doing. Tell me about it. And so he told me a little about it, and I thought about it. And then I said to your dad, I said, what do you think about this insurance thing? And he said, well, I don't know, but every insurance agent I know plays a lot of golf. So I thought, what the heck?
Sign me up.
I don't like what I'm doing.
So you became the boss of your first agency, and then how did that progress into you ending up having three, or how did you know you wanted to keep on that track, or or how did those opportunities come about, or is that something you had to go do for yourself?
Um, a little bit of both. So I started off pretty successfully right away.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guaranteed minimum salary that they would provide to you for 18 months while you were building your clientele. I broke it in 6 months and never went back on the guarantee. And when I was into it about, I don't know, maybe 15 years, the company wanted to expand into the market in whitefish. And so they asked me who I might know in that area who would want to open an agency. And I said, well, me. And they said, well, you can't because the contract or what they would pay a new agent is more than they were paying me for commissions. And they didn't want me writing all my business under that higher commission. And so that's when your dad actually became a licensed agent.
Mm-hmm.
We put him in as the official agent, but I actually opened the agency.
You ran the place.
I got it up and going. And then while we were there was an agent in Columbia Falls who I knew just from work, and her clients started calling the whitefish, saying, she's never there, her office is locked, there's a sign on the door. And so I called our manager and I said, what's going on? He said, well, she kind of retire and she's not doing a good job. And so I talked to Dad and he said, go ask her to buy it. And I thought, oh my God, I can't run three. He's over there anyway.
Might as well.
So I drove over there one day and said, why didn't you sell to me? And we agreed on a price, and all of a sudden I had three agencies.
Yeah. So go through that. How was having three agencies? Was it a little bit more than you could handle, or?
Initially it was awful. But Allstate at that point in time, they were encouraging agents to own multiple locations because what they could see is agents who did well had good systems. And I went to a training in Denver, and that's what I learned about. I learned to stop trying to manage people and instead manage systems. And, so this is the way we do it here. This is how we do it. And once I was able to get some people in place with those systems, then we we did well again for the next handful of years.
Hmm. And you continued on that track, and then you ended up selling them. What brought that to mind, or were you just kind of burnt out?
I think it was kind of a perfect storm. It was a lot of things happening at the same time. You boys were in high school, and high school is very parent intensive
Hmm.
because you guys were engaged in things. Gunnar was going to be a senior. Um, the company had also changed some requirements for staffing, which it was not a realistic expectation for rural markets. So, and I knew I was just going to have a really hard time staffing and being able to run those locations profitably because they were requiring me to hire so many people that I really didn't need, and it was increasing the overhead,
You weren't
and
making
it
as
was
much.
nobody was going to make as much, even the employees, and so I was going to lose them because there just wasn't enough revenue there. And then plus the farming was coming out of CRP, so your dad needed help, and it was just like. And the third thing was, at that point in time, my agencies were like really firing on all cylinders, and I could ask a good price for them,
Hmm.
and I was able to get that price. So
Yeah, able to sell it at the climax before it started
yeah,
going back down.
yeah.
All right, so back to yourself. What is one thing you would like to change about yourself, if you could, if anything?
Mm.
It can be as simple as being a couple inches taller or as deep as you
Oh,
want it to be.
yeah, I'd love to be a few inches taller, but no. Um, hmm.
I
I
know
don't
one
know.
thing.
Does that
I don't have much.
seem?
I don't have much patience, and I've come to figure that out. I'd like to be a little bit more patient with myself is one thing, but anything comes to mind for yourself?
Um, I wish I was better at being able to articulate my mind.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair. All right, and the easy last question. When you're not working or helping on the farm, what is one of your favorite things to be doing?
I have a whole bunch of things.
Good.
Working in the garden. I love that.
Hmm.
I love that. Um, Being near water, whether it's floating a river, fishing, canoeing on a lake. I love to be near water.
Hmm.
Traveling,
And traveling. What about skiing?
skiing.
Skiing's
Yes.
on there. Good stuff. All right, and we'll return to that last thing. If you or what was it? What have you always wanted to ask me if there is anything? No pressure.
Feels a lot of pressure.
Yeah. One thing I've always wanted. Are you happy with what you have done with your life? Is there anything you regretted or would like to go back and change?
Mm, I don't think so. Actually, I
No.
don't. I'm pretty happy.
Hmm.
I thought about going to law school, and I still kind of wonder if that might have been a good choice for me.
Hmm.
Uh, my best friend from childhood was actually in law school when I decided to go. She had just started, and she kind of talked me out of it. She's Because I was at a point in my life after graduating college that I was sort of like, there's got to be more than this. I needed a challenge, and she said, "Doesn't you go to law school, Carrie? If you haven't wanted, if it hasn't been a passion of yours,
It's not for you.
a thing to do."
Yeah.
So it's been something, and I can't think of anything that I wish I wanted to ask you that I never have, but I'm going to be thinking about that.
All right. Good stuff. All right. Well, I really thank you for your time, and it was good to hear some stuff that I haven't heard about. I never knew that somebody had a seizure in your wedding. That is new to me, and I love you, and I'll see you in a week. Bye bye.